Court of Appeal judges have rejected a last-ditch bid to stop the first flight taking asylum seekers to Rwanda. Now, it supports a previous High Court decision that argued it was in the, quote, public interest for the government to carry out its policies. Well, 11 people are now expected to be on the flight due to leave tomorrow. 11, it might be 8, who knows? It keeps changing. But anyway, legal challenges from lefty lawyers were predictable. But what's been most revealing, I think, is the way that Liberal critics have sneered at Rwanda, painting the emergent African nation as some kind of hellscape. Anyway, arguing in the Daily Telegraph that such complaints undermine Britain's place in the Commonwealth, social policy analyst and writer, and indeed friend of the show, friend in person as well, Dr. Rakib Ehsan, he's been writing, Liberal left bigotry, underpinned by a particularly destructive form of EU fanaticism, threatens to undermine post-Brexit Britain's efforts to cultivate vital security ties with largely non-European associations such as the Commonwealth. He goes on to say, Rwanda is a dynamic and advancing member of the international community in its own right, and it should be treated as such. Well, Rakib also rails against the safe and legal routes argument proposed by some as a solution to the migrant crisis, as one that threatens to dismantle all borders and harm Britain's security. But this is the problem, isn't it, ladies and gentlemen? We've hit the nail on the head because left-wing activists don't actually have any realistic solutions. No, they just disrupt and challenge every attempt to solve the problem of illegal immigration, as evidenced by the scenes in Peckham on Saturday, where a man arrested and bailed for immigration offences was released after protesters went to the scene to block enforcement officers. He was suspected of overstaying his visa. But the facts and the law are clearly irrelevant to lefty anarchist mobs like this, who think that they can subvert justice and decide who stays in the country. Well, I'm delighted to say that Rakib joins me now. Rakib, thank you very much. Now, critiques of the Rwanda plan don't actually have any solutions, do they?
Well, I think that's one of the main problems, Patrick. I'll admit that the UK-Rwanda migration partnership, it is a radical course of action and it has come in for criticism. But many of the people criticising the plan, they're unable to provide what I would consider to be security-oriented, pro-cohesion alternatives of their own. And I think that's a very serious problem, and it really weakens the quality of the debate that we're having. Within that subset, you also have people who I would say they've gone on the verge of vilifying Rwanda, if truth be told, and I don't think that's the right way to treat a relatively new member of the Commonwealth since the 1994 civil war, which descended into full-blown genocide. Rwanda has made considerable socioeconomic and socio-political progress.
Yeah, OK. I mean, obviously, I'm going to move on to what Rwanda's like as a nation in a second, but just focusing for now on our nation. And one thing that seems to annoy me and annoy a lot of people is this idea that the government can introduce some form of policy that they've clearly scratched their heads over for years, that the vast majority of people, it passes the pub test, Rakib, I tell you that much, it passes the pub test. You go into any pub up and down the country right now and there'll be people sitting there saying, I hope this thing works, apart from maybe a couple of pubs around the Islington area, for example. Yet despite that, we have mob rule, people blocking immigration vans, people banging their drums outside court. Now, some would say, look, we live in a democratic country where we have freedom of expression and the right to protest, and that's all gravy. But what people actually want is to subvert the law, don't they?
Well, I think there's a difference between having the right to protest and then thwarting these these forms of illegal immigration. I think that one thing that's very clear is that we continue to have a dysfunctional border security system, in my view. And if we are looking to clamp down on people smuggling enterprises, then the authorities have to be able to do that. And I think the scenes that you showed there, what you're seeing there isn't the right to protest. That's just a fundamental disrespect for authority. And that in itself should not be allowed in a functioning liberal democracy.
No, I agree with you personally, and I think it's, I don't think the police have got enough stick for this, frankly, OK? I understand that, OK, people can disagree with the government's laws or whatever, but the police were there to enforce that law, and if it works any other way, if I get done for massive tax fraud, right, and someone thinks, oh, don't do that because I don't want him to get done for that, they'd still prosecute me. I think they're too afraid of being called racist, Rakib.
Well, I think there is a possibility that many of our police forces have been paralysed by the forces of political correctness and identity politics, if truth be told. I think that there's a growing perception that the police is failing to really fulfill its bread and butter responsibilities when it comes to those kind of events. So I think that it's really important that the police in that kind of situation, they take more robust action. Otherwise, public confidence in police forces will only further reduce.
I mean, there were a couple of rainbow helmets away from complete disaster, in my opinion, there. But anyway, just talk to me about Rwanda, OK? I mean, what's your take on it? Because people are saying, well, hang on a second, it's not perfect at all. One of the, I suppose, heroes of that film, Hotel Rwanda, has had what did look to many to be a very dubious trial and now life in prison. So I wouldn't say that it's exactly an absolute bastion and a shining light of human rights, Rakib.
Oh, no, I think I said in my own piece for The Telegraph that it's hardly an oasis of liberal democracy, but neither is this kind of post-apocalyptic hellscape that is being presented by some people who are opposed to the UK-Rwanda partnership. I made the point that it's made significant forms of progress since the 1994 civil war. Interestingly, Rwanda, in my view, probably has one of the most pro-women political systems in the world. I think it has the highest rate of female participation in its parliament. So I think that when you look at Rwanda, the key thing for me is that Britain has to be in the business of establishing those strategically significant ties with emergent African nation states, which tend to be very dynamic economies with a great deal of human potential.
Yeah, I do find it absolutely fascinating that a lot of the people who really were desperate for us to remain in the EU as this, that and the other would have, I suppose, really had a much smaller world outlook than arguably the one that we're trying to create now. But that was social policy analyst and Daily Telegraph columnist, and well, he's a man of a jack of all trades. He's Dr. Rakib Ehsan. Thank you very much for coming on the show. Always great to have you, mate. We'll have you back on soon. Yeah, thank you very, very much.